country presents an extraordinary sight from above. Columns of dense smoke going up to 8,000 feet from nearly every town and cottage. Enormous fires from burning stores and dumps. Shells bursting every few yards. Columns of our troops retreating along all main roads and stragglers tramping westwards across the fields.
Still, the retreat went on.
I think we were past hope or despair. We regarded all events with an indifference of weariness, knowing that with the dawn would come another attack.
Once again, civilian refugees abandoned their homes and fled from the enemy.
On the road, the flood of refugees was tramping along in the midst of a cloud of powdery dust that settled on every one of them. The air was filled with the squeaks of carriages, the smack of whips, and the jingle of cowbells.
Haig and Pétain strove to rebuild their shattered line. Hindenburg realized that the battle was becoming a race to Amiens.
English reserves from the north, French troops drawn from the whole of central France were hastening to Amiens and its neighborhood.
More reinforcements were on their way from England.
Under my office window in the city, there passed this morning as fine a body of men as one could wish to see. They were a draft marching to the station en route to France. The wives and sweethearts of some marched with them. One couldn't watch these sturdy young fellows marching to face the terrors of war without a sense of inexpressible pride.
March the 25th. To the men on the crowded roads, it seemed the retreat would never end. In the words of a gunner, we were on the move again with real dismay in our hearts. Officers were ordered to use their revolvers if necessary to check panics. March the 26th. Now the armies were fighting in the wasteland of the old Somme battlefield of 1916.
On March the 26th, we dropped into a trench. It was a trench we knew of old. We had started to retreat on the 21st of March, 1918. And here we were back in the trench we had started the attack from on November the 13th, 1916.
In the shadow of catastrophe, the British High Command looked to the Channel ports. The French looked to Paris. A gulf was opening between the Allies. In Doullens, a drab little town in the path of the German attack, the Allied leaders gathered in an atmosphere of crisis. Haig believed that Pétain had lost his nerve. Pétain believed that the British would be herded into the Channel. Clemenceau, the French Prime Minister, was appalled at Pétain's pessimism. But General Foch was resolute.
We must fight in front of Amiens. We must fight where we are now. As we have not been able to stop the Germans on the Somme, we must not now retire a single inch.
This was Haig's chance to have the pessimistic Pétain overruled. He took it.
If General Foch will consent to give me his advice, I will gladly follow it.
The conference broke up. Foch had been made Supreme Allied Commander in all but name. But the crisis of the imperial battle had already passed. The tidal wave, the rolling force of March the 21st had spent itself. "5 days of marching and fighting without relief. 5 days short of water, without proper sleep. 5 days of the heaviest air attacks ever yet suffered by fighting troops. The German soldiers knew that the life and death of the fatherland were in their hands, but they could do no more.
The power of attack was exhausted. Our spirits sank to zero.
Day by day, the advance went slower, grew narrower. Hindenburg read the signs of failure.
With us, human nature was urgently voicing its claims. We had to take breath. The infantry needed rest, and the artillery ammunition. It was lucky for us that we were able to live to a certain extent on the supplies of the beaten foe. Otherwise, we should not have been able to cross the Somme.
British canteens and supply dumps had also served to hinder the German advance. The Germans had not seen such riches for years.
We came across a richly furnished provision and kitting out depot which the British had abandoned. Joyously, we rushed for the provisions. There was the thick brown beer which we had done without so long and which cooled our parched throats. We were desperately in need of good food, so much in fact that we forgot about the enemy.
Suddenly, they realized what paupers the Germans had become, how little the British had been injured by 4 years of war.
You know that the German army and the German doctors didn't have any bandages? What we used was crepe paper to wind round the wounds of the soldiers. And one can imagine how long that lasted. They just dissolved as quickly as many of the great coats our soldiers had to wear.
The proud German army looted British depots like peasants in a palace. On March the 28th,
today the advance of our infantry suddenly stopped near Albert. Nobody could understand why. Our airmen had reported no enemy between Albert and Amiens. I jumped into a car with orders to find out what was causing the stoppage. As soon as I got near Albert, I began to see strange sights. Men dressed up in comic disguise. Men with top hats on their heads. Men who could hardly walk. The advance was held up, and there was no means of getting it going again for hours.
That our troops did not achieve all the success that was possible was due above all to their not always being under the firm control of their officers. They had been checked by finding food depots, and valuable time had thus been lost.
the Germans grew weaker. The Allies grew stronger. Since March the 25th, a French army of 7 divisions had entered the line, and another was marching up fast.
There was a whole fleet of trucks sent to carry off the entire division. There could no longer be any doubt. We were about to go to battle. Our life was a constant turmoil for the next 2 days. We were going day and night, halting and then moving on again shortly after halting.
Haig had drained the rest of the British front to bar the road to Amiens. By the end of March, the great retreat was over.
We got to Ham eventually. That was the biggest town there was there, outside St. Quentin. When we got into there, nobody knew anybody. There was no such thing as a battalion. You're a nondescript pile of all sorts of regiments. Bits and pieces, anybody at all. Sanitary people, cooks, everybody. They were all in it.
April the 5th. Disappointment in German hearts, weariness in German bodies. They strove for the last time to break through. They failed. The imperial battle was over. Hindenburg and Ludendorff gave orders for another offensive against the weakened British. In Flanders, where the British line ran close to the sea and Haig dared not give ground. April the 9th, 1918. 3 hours of bombardment, so terrible that it drove men out of their minds. Then the attack. Only half the number of men of March the 21st. Only half the width of front. But the German storm groups struck not British defenders, but raw Portuguese. They broke. Once again, the Allies trod the humiliating road of defeat. There seemed to be nothing to stop the Germans from reaching the sea.
We reached a village called Esters. When we reached it, it was like the Bank of England on a very busy morning, the Mansion House or Staines Bridge on a Sunday afternoon. Or hundreds of vehicles and nothing moving at all. One of the drivers behind me was, in one of the wagons behind me, was crying because we expected to be taken prisoners. The Germans were coming on. You could almost feel their batteries leapfrogging forward.
Haig had very few reserves. They had been sent to the Amiens front. One thing stood between him and catastrophe, the fighting spirit of the British soldier. Censorship reports on soldiers' letters home revealed the effect of the retreat on the morale of the army.
No one ever believes we're winning. The Germans have gained more in a month than we've gained in 1.5 years.
There are a good many out here like myself, fed up and don't care a damn which side wins.
I'm surprised to hear you've joined the Women's Land Army. Do you realize, Maggie, you're helping to prolong the war? What does it matter whether we win or not? We shall never get it over so long as the women and girls keep relieving men for the army. Only when there are no men left will the war finish. That's the way the lads out here look at it.
The men's nerves are gone, and not one man has any stomach for this game.
In an order of the day, Haig appealed to the doggedness of the British soldier.
There is no other course open to us but to fight it out. Every position must be held to the last man. There must be no retirement. With our backs to the wall and believing in the justice of our cause, each one of us must fight on to the end.
The British fought it out. By the end of April, the Germans were again brought to a standstill. The greatest of all attempts since 1914 to win the war by purely military victory had failed. The very size of the imperial battle had doomed it. It could not be nourished, despite Ludendorff's ruthless mobilization of every horse and lorry and wagon. The German failure cost 350,000 out of their last reserves of men. Men were the fuel of war. As the manpower of Europe became exhausted, the war began to burn itself out, like a forest fire starved by its own appetite. Only America could pour fresh fuel into the diminishing flames. Since March the 21st, nearly 200,000 Americans had landed in France. Germany's chances of snatching victory dwindled with every tick of the clock. Ludendorff was forced to stake Germany's waning power on another gamble. With desperation in his heart, Ludendorff swung his armies south.